31 verses. I'm going to...
31 chapters.
Remember, the verses weren't originally numbered. That came... Neither were the chapters. That came much, much later.
So who did that?
I'm sorry?
Who did that? Like, did Israelite scribes do that?
No.
Was that done in the church?
Was that the one?
No, that was definitely done 1000 AD, something like that. Oh yeah, it was quite a while before that was.
So how would they divide up a book? How would they know where they were?
Well, the Jews just would quote it.
Yeah, but like in the church.
Different.
I'm not sure.
Like somewhere
I
in...
mean, they knew which book was which. It was
Right,
just...
they knew which book was what. Yeah, they knew the books.
Yeah, I
it was
know,
just
but
chapters and verses.
How would you know where you were in, let's say, the book of John?
Well,
That's the
before
problem.
then,
We talked about
Yeah.
Jesus.
okay, who had a Bible at that point?
The preacher.
Every church, if they had one at all, had it chained to the pulpit.
Yeah.
The folk in the couldn't read anyway.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter. They weren't reading them. The priests weren't reading the Bible either. So
Why
it
not?
doesn't matter. They were just quoting church doctrine.
Oh.
That's what they
I
did.
heard, just, that may have even been this morning, was that the chapters and verses were divided about 500 years ago, about the time of the printing
Printing
press.
press. Well, so it's even later than what I was thinking.
Mhm.
But it was quite a long time then, right?
Sometimes some of the verse splits are like, why did they do it there?
They made a mistake.
Yeah, like it should have been
there's a
like
lot of
there.
Yeah, the verse, the chapter numerations, the verse numerations are not inspired.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're wrong. It's fine. All right,
And
I would
the
like to
big
divide.
problem, he said, with having divided it to verses is people pull one verse
That's exactly
and
right.
quote that,
Yeah.
and that's what I like.
Yes. Oh, yes. And so we're going to take our life verse from something completely out of context that God did not promise to you.
I can do all things through verse taken out of context.
That would be one of them. Okay, we are going to read this
Eventually.
eventually.
Maybe next week.
Don't you dare.
Let's break this up roughly into 5-verse chunks, and the last person can read 6. Okay, does that work? So can I have someone read 1 through 5? Matthew 6 through 10. Jenny 11 through 15. Noella 16 to 20. Did I see your hand? Go ahead, Keith. Thank you. 21 to 25. I'm gonna let Barbie do it. And then 26 to 31. I saw Peter's hand before I saw any. I'm sorry, guys. It's just
Well, I already read
I
that
caught a
first,
hand. So anyway, I have no idea what order that was. So, and Carol, if you raised your hand, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Proverbs 11.
Yes.
Yes. You didn't even have it open? Okay, which verses did I give you?
1 through 5.
Okay, Miss Carol's going to read that because you
Okay.
didn't have your Bible open. Could you read those for us, Carol? Shame
A
on you.
false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. The righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness.
The righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their lust. When the wicked dies, his hope will perish, and the expectation of wealth perishes too. The righteous is delivered from trouble, and the wicked walks into it instead. With his mouth the godless man would destroy his neighbor, but by knowledge the righteous are delivered. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there are shouts of gladness.
By the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted, but by the mouth of the wicked it is overthrown. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. Whoever goes about silent reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps the things covered. no kindness the people fall, but in the abundance of counselors there is safety. Whoever puts up security for a stranger will surely suffer harm. He who hates striking hands in pledge is secure.
A gracious woman gets honor, and a violent man gets riches. A man who is kind benefits himself, but a cruel man hurts himself. The wicked earns deceptive wages, but one who sows righteousness gets a sure reward. Whoever is steadfast in righteousness will live, but he who pursues evil will die.
Those of crooked heart are an abomination to the Lord, but those of blameless ways are his delight. Be assured, an evil person will not go unpunished, but the offspring of the righteous will be delivered. Like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. The desire of the righteous ends only in good, the expectation of the wicked in wrath. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered.
The people curse him who holds back grain, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it. Whoever diligently seeks good seeks favor, but evil comes to him who searches for it. Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. Whoever troubles his household will inherit the wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise of heart. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and whoever captures souls is wise. If the righteous is repaid on earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner?
Okay.
I'm going to be highlighting a lot in this chapter.
So give me your observations. Yeah, Peter.
Righteousness is mentioned exceedingly consistently, and wickedness is the other side of it, and they are compared constantly. But righteousness is just
Righteousness versus
everywhere.
wickedness.
And the reward of the two is also compared.
Yes, this chapter is basically a comparison in almost every single verse of what happens when a righteous person does something and what happens when a wicked person does something. And either verse by verse or in verse chunks. It's a lot.
I find it interesting in verse 5 and 6. Well, yeah, 5 and 6. Your character is what your reward will be. Like, your reward will be the same as your character. I'm not putting that very well. The righteous,
What you
the
give is
integrity of,
what you give is what you get.
yes.
Where are you seeing that in 5 and 6?
The righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness.
That's also in verse 24.
Yeah.
Just thinking that.
I think what you would...
Big Mac.
how do I put it?
Reap what you sow.
Yeah, really. I know it's not exactly what you said, but just trying to summarize
Yeah.
briefly. What else?
Verse 12 and the first half of verse 9 both have to do with a godless or wicked man and his neighbor. And the godless man destroying his neighbor and belittling your neighbor means that you lack sense and basically are compared with the wicked. And after you belittle your neighbor, if you compare that with verse 9, then the progression would be you then try to destroy your neighbor or take advantage after you belittle.
Yeah, so there's a reap what you sow personally, and then there's a discussion of the effect you have on other people, right? So, like in verse 9, the godless destroys his neighbor. Verse 10, how a city is affected, so a whole community is affected by the righteous. Verse 11, again, the whole community is affected. Verse 12, we're back to the neighbor, kind of bookending with the neighbor and society in the middle. Yeah. So definitely an emphasis there, and that would be one of those contextual chunks I mentioned last week. But the effect on others.
Verse 16 is different than the rest of the chapter, as far as just, if not in its actual content, well, yeah, content, but basically the word, it's not phrased the same as the rest of it.
What's the difference? I don't disagree with you. I'm just asking you to be more specific.
It's more like personal, like not personal. It's really hard to describe.
What are you supposed to do with verse 16? What do you do with verse 16? What do you learn from verse 16? How do you obey verse 16?
It's weird that it actually is true, but violent men get riches.
But why?
Because they
It's
they-
an evil, perverse world, and the fact that he pairs that with a gracious woman will get honor.
I know we're taking observations, but sometimes the Proverbs themselves are not statements of anything like a promise or a cause and effect. Promise isn't the right way to put it, cause and effect. Nor is it even necessarily advice / instruction. Sometimes it's just an observation on the nature of life.
The sun rises every day. Violent men get riches.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, this happens. You need to be aware of this.
And you can infer the fact that some people think that if you have riches, then you must be blessed and doing something good. And he's kind of pointing out the fact that you can be doing it completely wrong and get that outcome. But that doesn't make what you did the right thing.
Well,
And
okay,
22
so
and
then,
16 are paired.
Peter, can you give other people a chance to make observations, please? Thanks. Verse 24, it's interesting, riches came up in verse 16, and a very different aspect of riches comes up in verse 24. And I think just one takeaway from it, a lot of times people want to equate, if you are wealthy, you have God's blessing.
Right.
And basically, when you read the Proverbs, it has nothing, like, there's a lot of pragmatic, practical insight about riches and wealth and whatnot, but it's not really necessarily a designation of, if you are wealthy, you are blessed. You
Right.
can get those riches from all sorts of random ways, but verse 24 is an observation that you cannot outgive God. And when you are one who is generous, there tends to be blessing involved with that.
Yeah, there tends to be, God keeps providing so that you
So
can
you
continue to
be
be,
the conduit.
so that you can continue to be generous. Notice how 24, 25, and 26 go together.
Yeah.
Right? So there is this idea of the generous person. By the way, what does the generous person do in the broadest terms? What is the effect of a generous person?
They bless others.
They're a blessing on society, right? So we've got that idea again of the generous person. And isn't it interesting that the one who scatters, the generous, the one who sells in verse 26, not even give it away, just willing to sell it, right? Rather than withhold it for yourself. He doesn't use the word righteous there at all. Like, he uses totally different terms, but you in the flow you get the feel, which we're supposed to, that righteousness includes being a blessing to your community, whatever that community is.
Do you think he intentionally did not use the term righteousness to indicate that, although if you're righteous, you should be like this, being like this, whether or not you are righteous, will have this effect in your community? Because there are not saved people who give freely to others,
Right.
and have this effect without being righteous. But if you are righteous, you should be like that.
Remember, when this was written, it was written within the covenantal context.
of Israel.
Of Israel. The context of those who are this way because they fear the Lord. And so the effect that they have on the society, on their community, is of people who are blessing the Lord because of God fears within the community, blessing the community as conduits of God's blessing. So I think what I'm saying is, yes, there's a general principle of honest do-gooders are better for society than violent, crooked thieves, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's almost a truism. Almost didn't need to be said. But his point is within this covenant context. God-fearers are like this. Non-God-fearers have a bad effect on even the economy. Okay, what else?
Some of these verses kind of are inclusive. The righteous, the wicked. It's bunches of people.
Yeah.
And others are individual.
Good.
The man, woman, the one. There's several in there.
That's good.
The wise. It's one man or one person rather than the group. And I'm not sure why they're different, but
That's what makes 16 stand out to me.
Say that again.
That's what makes 16 stand out.
So, I would, if I would hazard a guess, and that's a really excellent observation. If I would hazard a guess, is that the collective, the Proverbs, the verses that are just a collective, are stating a principle. Right? They're stating a principle. The individual ones invite you to find yourself in one or the other of those groups. Right? Because verse 16 invites you to go, where do I fit here? By the way, does anyone have a different translation on verse 16 than what was read aloud? I have a gracious woman attains honor and ruthless men attain riches. I think that's pretty much what we read
Yeah,
before.
violent, but
Yeah, I meant to go back and look this up. I just did not have time this afternoon.
What translation do you want to read it out of?
Don't worry about it. I'm
English
sorry.
just says gets, which isn't that much different.
Gets?
Gets.
Okay. No, the question that I have is the first line, actually. And there's one particular Bible scholar who is famous for his work on Proverbs. Really argues that the first line of verse 16 should not be translated this way, and that the woman in verse 16 is not, that gracious is the wrong way to address how that's translated, that it doesn't have to do with her being gracious as though she is a woman of character versus a man of violence. It is an observation on how do women get what they want versus how do men get what they want. And that neither one, don't worry about your English translation, that neither line is actually good. That he would argue, that's actually an update from Maya, we'll read that in a minute. He would argue that the point is that it is still an observation, but it's not pointing to good people. And then in that way, verse 16 really does pair up with verse 22. You've got this beautiful woman who lacks discretion, who manipulates, who uses her beauty to get what she wants. But whereas if verse 16 just makes an observation, verse 22 kind of drops a judgment on that. Which I think verse 22 is hilarious, actually. I love verse 22. I just think it's hilarious. Because in terms of a parallel, usually usually you can look at line A and line B and go, all right, line A, this is parallel to this in line B, and in line A, this result is parallel to the result in line B. Whether it's an anti-parallel or not, you can go, I know what relates. If you look at verse 22, at least as it shows up in our English translations, which is which? Is the beauty the gold ring and the woman is the pig snout? Or the woman without discretion, she's the pig, and beauty is wasted on her? I actually think that's the idea. Beauty is wasted on an indiscreet woman because she's like a pig. Ouch. And mind that most of the chapters, when it does get individual, speaking to men, right? So you ladies get one verse that is clearly to you that says, don't be like that. Right? Okay. Girls, don't be like that. Don't be piggy. No Miss Piggies.
It also says, men don't pay attention to the outward appearance.
And it definitely, right, guys, if you're looking at a beautiful woman, and boy, whew, we like that. If she's not discreet, as in she flaunts, she flirts, she manipulates. I remember, well, we actually kind of skipped it in the mixed group, but in Proverbs 5, 6, and 7, we're warned about this flattering seductress. It doesn't matter how pretty she is, or how nice she smells. Walk away. She's a pig. Right?
Yeah.
And you'll be flattered that a pretty girl is paying attention. If she is using her prettiness for that, walk away. She's a pig. What's that?
Run.
Pigs eat people,
Yeah, walk.
so run.
Not walk, run. That's true. Be Joseph. Flee the house, even if it gets you in prison. Get out. Yeah. Just a couple more minutes. Obviously, so much more we could say, but my goal as we get into this, and has been, is we're sampling, right? We're sampling the Proverbs at this point. Pointing out where there are contextual blocks, where there are big lessons to learn, but for the most part, we're sampling, and then we have to move on just for time's sake. Anything else? Go ahead.
There's a lot in this chapter about riches and how to attain them and how, what to do with them.
Right.
But in verse 28, you have, don't trust in them.
Yep, I was just noticing that, Barbie.
Right. Which would be the reason why, excuse me, in verse 24 and following, there is one who scatters and yet increases all the more. There is one who withholds what is justly due, only to come to poverty. A generous person will be prosperous. One who gives others plenty of water will himself be given plenty. One who withholds grain, the people will curse him, but blessing will be on the head of the one who sells it. So 24 to 26 is about not withholding, not hoarding.
Yeah.
Right? Not hoarding. Why do people hoard things? I'm not talking about hoarders who are hoarding pizza boxes. I'm talking about
Fear.
Security.
fear and security.
This.
The fear of a loss of security. So what then does verse 28 say?
They're not secure.
Yeah.
But in the context, the lesson is you can be generous because your security is not in what you possess. You can be free with what you possess because your security should not be, and if you're in Christ, is not in what you possess.
Like in verse 4, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness
Right.
delivers from death.
There's no point in taking riches with you anyway. Right? You can't do anything with them. And in fact, if we think about James chapter 5, as we're doing in the mornings at home, James tells the rich folk he's writing to, you rich folk, weep and howl with misery because you've mistreated and withheld, and now you're going to face judgments. So your lack of generosity is actually contributing to your eternal...
Troubles.
What's that? Eternal judgment. Yeah. Which is why the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
I really like verse 30. The fruit of righteousness is a tree of life.
That's a good one.
And whoever captures souls is wise. And it's like, in Israel, it's kind of interesting because they weren't trying to like evangelize other Israelites. It was kind of presumed that you're all Israelite. It's just different levels of obedience to the word of God. So the fact that they have what would the capturing souls mean back then?
Right.
And is that actually more referencing a more after Christ
Can
sort
it be
of?
interpreted in that manner?
No. That's a very good question. I'm glad you brought it up. A number of people will quote and or even preach from verse 30 as a reason why you must evangelize. Verse 30 has nothing to do with evangelism. It's nothing to do with evangelism. It is, however, that doesn't mean there's no application to evangelism. It's just not about evangelism. The point, and partly to your point, it's written into a covenant community where they were evangelizing. I mean, you have the prophets doing what they were doing at certain specific times in Israel's history. The point, though, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. And one who is wise gains souls, or gains or captures souls. Yeah, so a soul winning, yeah. No, that's not the idea. The idea is the effect that wisdom has not just on yourself, but on other people. The community, the family, the society, which we've already kind of highlighted. And the effect that we have, I say we generally, I'm not the wise. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, right? Garden of Eden type stuff. So when you gain a soul, when you have impacted someone else toward wisdom, so that's why I say there is application to evangelism. It's just not about evangelism. But it's the effect of the wise on other people, not just you've blessed them because you've provided for them, or you've bolstered the economy, or you just don't have awful leaders just oppressing people. It's that, but it's also the sense of you affect other people, they come along and grow wise. Right? And participate in the tree of life. So if we grow in wisdom, then we have an impact on other people where potentially they start gaining in wisdom and participating in the tree of life as well. Right? So again, there is this effect that we have. We can have. Yeah.
Which ultimate wisdom would be, coming to God.
That's why, absolutely.
But
That's why it is going to have impact on evangelism. Go ahead.
Well, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
That's it. That's it. One last thing, and then I'm done. Then we're done. So notice, so much of the chapter is righteousness and wickedness. Very little is spoken of wisdom. Now the word's in there, but not nearly as much, right? Right? It doesn't say nearly as much about wisdom as the first 9 chapters did. Now we're talking about righteousness and wickedness. And that's just really important to remember too. Just another emphasis. Wisdom is more than just good advice. Right?
It's practical.
Practical application.
Yes, but that's still just, you can practically apply good advice. Biblical wisdom is righteousness. Lived out righteousness. So you can have a person who has all the right answers, doesn't mess up with his finances, is a leader and works hard, and if he's not righteous, he's not wise. Right? Right?
Yeah.
We make good decisions and not be wise if our lives are not marked by righteousness. Yeah.
What is the definition of righteousness?
That one's fairly simple. To do the right thing. And it's usually in the context of relation.
So you can be righteous without having a context of being righteous to or because of God. like righteousness can refer to something else as well. Just not
Biblically, it's always in relation to the covenant of God.
Got it.
Yeah. Unless you're reading where someone is kind of taunting Israel for their false righteousness, their claims of righteousness, or the Pharisees and their claims of righteousness, but it's done out of an impure motive. But if you're talking about in the good sense, righteousness in the positive sense in Scripture, it's always tied to relationship, covenant with God. Always. Otherwise, all of my righteous deeds are as filthy rags.
Yeah.
Right? So biblically, there is no real righteousness apart from covenant relationship with God.
Concerning George, he's off the ventilator.
Hold on just a second. Let's go